Christmas wouldn't be the same without Rankin Bass Entertainment. This studio shaped an entire generation's understanding of the holidays, and their television specials have had a huge impact on our culture and have stood up to the test of time better than just about any other studio. Rankin Bass Christmas specials have aired continuously year after year for decades, and in this video I'm going to look back at the history of the studio and its impact, beginning with their most famous production, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. Rudolph premiered in 1964, but it wasn't the first show produced by Rankin Bass. Arthur Rankin Jr. and Jules Bass founded Rankin Bass Entertainment 4 years earlier. In 1960, under the name Videocraft International, their first project was a TV series called The New Adventures of Pinocchio, followed by 2 series based on The Wizard of Oz. Rudolph was based on the 1949 song written by Johnny Marks. Marks' brother-in-law was Robert L. May, who worked at Montgomery Ward Department Store. May's boss asked him to create a children's book for Christmas featuring an animal. The script for the Christmas special was written by Romeo Muller, who later claimed that he had to base it on the song because he couldn't find a copy of the original children's book that May had written. Singer and actor Burl Ives voiced Sam the Snowman, who narrated the show. However, the rest of the cast was Canadian. This was because at the time, America had a limited pool of voice actors due to the decline of radio plays, while Canada continued to produce them. Rankin Bass could tap into this talent pool at a more affordable rate. The voice of Rudolph is credited to Billy Richards, but her real name was Billy May Richards. Rankin Bass changed her name to avoid revealing that the character was voiced by a woman. Ives wasn't initially planned for the special, but NBC and General Electric, who were sponsoring the show, insisted on having a big name attached to the project. As a result, Sam the Snowman was added at the last minute, and the character was designed to specifically resemble Ives. Storyboards were drawn in New York City, but the actual stop-motion animation was done in Tokyo. Many people don't realize how much animation was outsourced to Japan during that era. Several animators who worked on Rankin & Bass films would later go on to help create Studio Ghibli, which has made some of the most critically acclaimed animated films ever. Rudolph, like many other Rankin & Bass projects, used animagic. Animagic was a stop-motion technique that focused on using puppets instead of clay. At the time, Ray Harryhausen was the most famous user of stop-motion, but where his films used clay models and attempted to make them mimic actual movements as close as possible, Rankin & Bass used puppets to make their films appear more magical and family-friendly. The popularity of the special was so unexpected that most of the puppets used in production were given away. By 2005, only 2 of the original puppets, Santa and Rudolph, were believed to still exist. These were featured on an Antiques Roadshow episode on PBS, valued at $8,000 to $10,000 each.
He opens it up and my heart skipped a beat. I'm looking at 2 faces I've seen my entire life. Rudolph and Santa Claus from the beloved 1964 special. Whenever you see something iconic like that, immediately you think, okay, these probably aren't the actual puppets. But once he told his story, things got interesting.
My aunt worked at Rankin Bass Productions for about 10 or 15 years in the 70s and early 80s, and she acquired all of them, and they were the production puppets from Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer.
In 2020, they were later restored and auctioned off for $368,000. During the original broadcast, there was a scene where Cornelius discovers a peppermint mine. However, this scene was later cut, and a new scene was filmed featuring Santa visiting the island of misfit toys. The change came after children complained that Santa wasn't in enough scenes. Over the years, different versions of the show have been made, and certain musical numbers have been cut or added. It continues to air every year, holding the record for longest continuously running Christmas special. A video game was even made based on the film, although it is widely considered one of the worst video games ever, with rumors claiming that it can be beaten in less than a few minutes. Following Rudolph, Rankin Bass produced several lesser-known specials, including The Ballad of Smokey the Bear, The Mouse on the Mayflower, which I remember watching in school, The Cricket on the Hearth, and The Little Drummer Boy, one of the most famous Christian-themed specials, featuring the voice of Academy Award-winning actor Jose Ferrer. In the 90s, classic media attempted to restore The Little Drummer Boy, but the original 35mm print had gone missing, so a 16mm version had to be used instead. The Little Drummer Boy is actually named Aaron, and he is unknowingly invited to witness the birth of Jesus in Bethlehem. Upon arriving at the stables, he has nothing to give as a gift, so he plays his drums for the newborn Christ. The next Christmas special Rankin and Bass produced was very different. Frosty the Snowman. This short film used traditional animation instead of stop motion, and premiered on CBS in 1969, immediately following A Charlie Brown Christmas. This special was based on the song written by Walter E. Rollins and Steve Nelson. Although the song was originally recorded by Gene Autry, it's better known for the version sung by comedian Jimmy Durant, who also voiced the narrator in this special. The show was written by Romeo Mueller, who had also written Rudolph and the Little Drummer Boy. Rankin Bass wanted the special to look like scenes from a Christmas card, so they hired Paul Corker Jr., an artist for Mad Magazine and greeting cards, to design the characters and scenes. At just 25 minutes, Frosty was about half the length of Rudolph and is sometimes shown back-to-back with it on TV. In the 1970s, Rankin Bass shifted into high gear, producing multiple specials every year. They became the go-to studio for children's programming. One of my all-time favorites is Santa Claus is Coming to Town. While the title is based on the classic song by Coots and Gillespie, the film tells the life story of Kris Kringle before he becomes Santa Claus. The special featured voice talents of Fred Astaire and Mickey Rooney, probably the most famous actors to ever appear in Rankin Bass specials up to that point. Like Rudolph, this film was cut several times. In the 80s, many songs were removed for time constraints, and in the 90s, even more songs were shortened. Additionally, the character of Topper was changed to Waddles. When the film aired on Freeform, several scenes were cut due to content concerns, such as the moment when Burgermeister Burger burns the toys in front of children. Freeform felt that this could be traumatizing. And by the way, Burgermeister Burger is one of the coolest villain names I've ever heard. I later learned that Burgermeister is the German word for mayor or leader. Rankin Bass produced only one TV special in 1971, Here Comes Peter Cottontail, for Easter, but the following year they released 4 specials, none of which were Christmas themed though. Their next Christmas special wouldn't air until December 8th, 1974, when 'Twas the Night Before Christmas premiered. This wasn't just a retelling of the classic poem, but an original story about a family of mice who try to ensure that Santa doesn't forget their town after one of them writes a letter to a newspaper claiming that Santa doesn't exist. 2 days later, another Rankin Bass special premiered, A Year Without a Santa Claus, one of my personal favorites. In this story, Santa decides to skip Christmas because he believes people no longer appreciate it. Mrs. Claus sends 2 elves, Jingle and Jangle, along with Vixen the reindeer, to find proof that people still have Christmas spirit. Vixen is taken to the pound by the local dog catcher, and the mayor will only release her if they can make it snow in town. But Snow Miser can't make it snow because his brother Heat Miser controls the weather there. Mickey Rooney, who voiced Santa in Santa Claus is Coming to Town, returned to voice Santa in this special. The songs Heat Miser and Cold Miser became classics, and the special was remade as a live-action version nearly 30 years later starring John Goodman. However, the live-action version was widely panned. Rankin and Bass produced The First Christmas, the story of the first Christmas snow, in 1975, featuring the voice of Angela Lansbury. The story revolves around a young shepherd boy named Felix, who is blind and lives in a small village. One winter, Felix is caught in a snowstorm while taking care of his sheep, and he is rescued by a nun. She takes him to a convent where he is taught about Christmas. 1976 would be their biggest year yet, with 4 films produced, including an Easter special titled The First Easter Rabbit and 3 Christmas specials. The first was Frosty's Winter Wonderland, a direct sequel to Frosty the Snowman. Jackie Vernon returned to voice Frosty, but Andy Griffith took over the narration role from Jimmy Durant, who had retired after suffering a stroke. Frosty's Winter Wonderland would cause issues years later when CBS obtained rights to Frosty the Snowman, but not its sequel. In the early 90s, CBS produced its own Frosty sequel, Frosty Returns, which aired after Frosty the Snowman to give the impression of a direct sequel, even though it clearly wasn't. Frosty Returns featured a new cast including John Goodman and was produced by Lorne Michaels, the creator of Saturday Night Live. I loved Frosty Returns and remember when it premiered in 1995. Since it wasn't a Rankin Bass production, it doesn't air on Freeform or AMC like most other specials. 1976 also saw the release of Rudolph's Shiny New Year, in which Father Time needs Rudolph's help to find Baby New Year or risk having it be December 31st forever. Billy Mae Richards returned to the voice of Rudolph, and Red Skelton voiced Father Time. The final film of the year was Little Drummer Boy Book 2, a sequel to the original, widely considered to be one of the worst Rankin Bass specials, with a 0% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. In 1977, Rankin Bass worked on an animated adaptation of The Hobbit, but also made Nestor the Long-Eared Christmas Donkey, a retelling of the birth of Christ. In the film, Nestor guides Mary and Joseph to the stable where Christ is born. Nestor was later made fun of on an episode of Riff Tracks in 2006. Riff Tracks was an online spin-off of Mystery Science Theater 3000, in which characters watch movies considered to be bad and make fun of them. 1978 brought The Stingiest Man in Town, an adaptation of Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol, but told from the perspective of an insect. It was a remake of a 1950s live-action special. In 1979, Rankin and Bass released Rudolph and Frosty's Christmas in July and Jack Frost. Christmas in July marked Frosty's first appearance in stop-motion animation, with Jackie Vernon reprising his role. Mickey Rooney and Billy Mae Richards also returned. In the special, Rudolph and Frosty are invited to Summer Valley by a magician named Winterbolt, who is planning to use a powerful spell to make summer last forever and eliminate Christmas. I remember that Freeform, back when it was still ABC Family, would actually show this special in July sometimes. Jack Frost told the story of an immortal winter spirit who falls in love and chooses to live as a human. Robert Morse voiced Jack, and the story was narrated by a groundhog voiced by Buddy Hackett. In the 90s, there were several VHS versions of Jack Frost that were sold really cheaply, sometimes at dollar stores. This led to an urban legend that producers had forgotten to update the copyright on Jack Frost and had accidentally allowed it to enter public domain. This turned out to be false. The film was still protected by copyright, but the issue was the copyright holders just didn't care too much since the film wasn't as famous as some of the other Rankin and Bass films. However, once the cable station started airing reruns of the special, it grew in popularity and an official DVD was eventually released. 1980 was another busy year for Rankin and Bass. They had two specials, Pinocchio's Christmas and Return of the King, the latter a sequel to their earlier The Hobbit adaptation. Contrary to popular belief, the Lord of the Rings animated film was not a sequel to The Hobbit. It was directed by Ralph Bakshi, not Rankin and Bass, although the films are sometimes shown together and marketed as parts of a trilogy. Pinocchio's Christmas aired on December 3rd on ABC, and unlike most Rankin Bass films, it didn't feature any major comedians or established Hollywood stars. Their next special, The Leprechaun's Christmas Gold, told the story of a cabin boy who encounters a group of leprechauns while looking for a Christmas tree. Originally intended to be a St. Patrick's Day special, ABC asked for it to be set at Christmas, so Romeo Mueller rewrote it. It would be several years before Rankin and Bass made another Christmas special, The Life and Adventures of Santa Claus, which would be released in 1985. This would be their last stop-motion film. Based on a book by L. Frank Baum, it told an alternate origin story of Santa Claus and was not connected with any of their other films. It also lacked a celebrity star or narrator, unlike previous specials. Rankin and Bass pretty much called it quits in the late 80s. They produced Thundercats and then folded the studio in 1987 after the failure of a TV series called The Comic Strip. Although the two would collaborate again on a holiday cartoon in 2001 called Santa Baby, which was based on the classic Christmas song and was unique in that it featured an entirely African-American voice cast, It's iconic that their last film together would actually have the most well-known cast of any of their specials, including the voice talents of Patti LaBelle, Gregory Hines, Eartha Kitt, and Vanessa Williams. As of 2018, TV rights for the Rankin Bass specials have been divided among ABC and Freeform, with ABC getting access to all the post-1974 specials and Freeform having everything pre-1974. I actually could not find much information about Santa Baby other than it premiered on Fox, so I'm unsure to which channel, if any, has the rights to air it. Rudolph received a sequel in 2001 titled Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer and the Island of Misfit Toys. Rankin and Bass were not involved in the project, and it received a lot of negative reviews, mainly due to its animation. The film didn't use stop motion. Instead, it used CGI, which was supposed to look like stop motion, but just didn't have the same magic that the classic had. A Year Without Santa Claus would also get a sequel in 2008 titled A Miser Brothers Christmas. This film would not only use stop motion, but Mickey Rooney also returned to play Santa. With the advent of CGI, stop action has largely gone out of fashion, but several directors and studios still produce these films from time to time, such as Aardman Animations, who are most famous for their Wallace and Gromit cartoons. In 2006, they switched to CGI for their film Flushed Away, but then eventually switched back to clay models. The stop-action animation of Rankin and Bass is largely why their films have remained so timeless. Unlike most animated films, which show their age quickly, few children realize that when they watch Rudolph, they are watching a show that is over 50 years old. Thank you for watching, and let me know in the comments what your favorite Rankin and Bass specials are.